we operate on three innovation horizons: the immediate horizon, product and process innovation; the strategic horizon, digital and structured; and we specialize in the disruptive horizon, and I'll talk a little bit about disruption in the presentation today. I've been doing this for about 12 years now, across all sectors, and some of the issues that I've been dealing with over the last couple of years are all seem to be converging at the moment, and they seem to be converging around four key areas, and I want to talk about those today. I want to talk about some of the key things you need to be thinking about in your innovation strategy, your capability strategy, your digital strategy, and your people strategy, and how they all sort of come together. So an innovation strategy, the big concept at the moment is the concept of substance. The concept, primarily from a multinational perspective, this drive towards having a more fundamental input into the intellectual property. And the earlier you get in, the more fundamental your ideas are in the intellectual property, the more tax moving forward that you'll be able to or the less tax that you'll be paying moving forward. And while this is a serious issue for large corporates in this country, the idea of substance, the idea of moving further forward in the process, really needs to be looked at in terms of the further forward you go in the process, the earlier the idea that you own in the space, the more control you have. So substance needs to be looked at in terms of control just as much as in terms of its financial impact. Agility is a big issue at the moment. Everybody's been pushed for shorter lead times and more SKUs. The key to remember about agility is a big part of why organizations leverage innovation. The key to agility here is that it's not going anywhere. This is going to get worse. So if you're holding out for things to improve on the agility side, that's not going to happen. It's the grain is pushing in the opposite direction. And the other big reason that organizations get involved in innovation is diversification, finding new things to offer or places to offer. One of the things that organizations, particularly in the manufacturing space, can start to look into at this point is, rather than finding new things to offer, is to change the way they offer what they're already offering and to deepen their specialism in the particular space. So as the world gets more generic with 3D printing and getting more specialized in whatever area you're actually good at is something that's worth considering. But the big issue in innovation is disruption. Right? Do you feel it in your space? Are you ready for it? Everything else in innovation is reasonably straightforward. It's difficult, but you're competing with people like yourselves. The issue with disruption is it's coming from somewhere else. It's coming from somewhere that you're not necessarily prepared for, and you're dealing with different types of people who are motivated in a different manner. So disruption is something that, unlike the other areas, disruption is way more outside your control. That doesn't mean it can't be controlled. Some of the things you need to understand about disruption comes in waves, and it hits different sectors at different times, typically. Now, whatever sector you're in, it may be difficult for you to understand exactly when you're going to be disrupted. If it's obvious, it's probably too late to do too much about it. But the how in disruption is always the same. In every sector, it's always the same. And I want to give you some of the underlying reasons for that. It all goes back, I think anybody involved in innovation understands the sort of diffusion bell curve. And it's the cumulative bell curve, the cumulative curve, the S curve. And the S curve is the classic life cycle curve. So this curve, the bell curve starts with you have no customers, and at the other end you have no customers left. The S curve, you have no customers, you have 100% of the customers you're ever going to have. It's the same difference. But this is a classic life cycle curve, so you've got a slow start, a period of stable growth, and a period of diminishing returns leading to death. And studies show that this is something that's accelerating over time. It's getting faster, so it's only going to get worse. Evolution itself, or progress itself, is an evolutionary process. And while it may seem from a distance to be reasonably smooth, it's actually a multi-generational process punctuated by jumps. These discontinuities, these jumps are what what we describe as disruption. That's the issue, is the discontinuity in progress. And that's the area that my organisation focuses on. The biggest sort of commentator on this disruption is probably Clayton Christensen in his 1997 book, The Innovator's Dilemma, where he pointed out that the first of a new generation performs relatively poorly compared to the last of an old generation. The older generation got its full ecosystem in place, its return on investment models would have matured. But if you persist with the old model, you'll end up going the way of the typewriter. Anybody in this room know who makes the world's best typewriters? Anybody care who makes the world's best typewriters? It's irrelevant. The other thing that happens in a disruption is that progress comes in disguise. So the first of the railway carriages were cleverly disguised as stagecoaches. So this does two things. One, people didn't have a mental model in their head how to do it otherwise, so they made it look as familiar as they could and as they could picture it. But the other thing is, it lulls people into a sense of security and a sense of familiarity with the new technology. And this is critical to that transition from one reality to a new paradigm. Same thing happens with the move from analog to digital music, where digital music was originally disguised as a plastic disc with a hole in the middle of it. But if you step back and look at the two ends of the curve, the digital music platform that we have today has very little in common with the original of the species. Same thing happens in communications, where mobile phones were disguised as not too dissimilar to portable phones, or to portable phones. And when you look, those two instruments have very little in common. So the point here is that the old ways, when you're looking at a paradigm shift, when you're looking at both ends of a disruption, you're comparing apples to oranges. But the sneaky thing about that is that the first of the apples, or the first of the oranges, are disguised as apples. Okay? A little bit esoteric, but bear with me. I'll try and ground it again now. Okay? So, the real question you have to ask in every industry right now is facing a digital disruption. The key thing you have to ask is, what's the true nature of that disruption? Well, right now, economists describe it as the third industrial revolution. Engineers call it manufacturing 4.0 or factory 4.0. Regardless of what they call it, everybody's converging on the same thing. Digital technology is invading the physical world. The genie is never going to be put back in the box. Right? Or bottle, wherever genies come from. It's going to change what we make and how we make it, and it's happening in every industry. Everybody is facing this right now. But the key is the fact that who you're making it for have already changed, and they've moved on. And now, as an industry, manufacturing is trying to catch up with a society that's already moving to another plane. And this is a very similar transformation in manufacturing as the original advent of electricity. It is that significant a paradigm shift, and we haven't seen a paradigm shift this significant in manufacturing since the late 19th century. The difference this time is, because of the acceleration, is that all sectors are going to be hit with the same disruption at the same time. And the critical issue in all of that is the scramble for talent and ICT resources in the next decade is going to be probably one of the single biggest issues that every manufacturing industry is going to deal with. And you're going to be competing with transport, you're going to be competing with energy, you're going to be competing with medicine, pharmaceuticals. Everybody is going to be hit with the exact same issues at the same time. So we've got a paradigm shift that is as significant as we've ever seen, all landing at the same time. That hasn't happened in history. So another thing to understand is that there's two phases of change in a paradigm shift. So before electricity, you had appliances. In the early phase of electricity, you had mirrors of those appliances, but they all had an analog path. And then there's a line drawn. And then there's an entire batch of things that happen that couldn't have happened except because of electricity. Same thing is going to happen in digital. And you may understand what happened before digital. You may have a sense of its analogs in early digital. What you really need to be thinking about at this stage, because We've gone past the tipping point. We've gone past the point of no return. What you really need to understand is, what can we start working on today to ensure that we're ready for tomorrow's digital reality? So, under your capability strategy, capital expenditure, what you need to understand is the markets are getting more transient. You have to be very tight with your capital expenditure. You have to maybe use services to enhance your return on investment. Or you think about your vertical capability strategy and rent rather than buy the capabilities that you need through strategic outsourcing, basically leveraging other people's capex. Or from a horizontal capability building perspective, you have to look at the adjacent verticals and see, can you offer your services in other spaces? In which case, you need to be thinking about sales and marketing and how you promote yourself, how you position the same capabilities in a different space, in a different language. So manufacturing companies need to be thinking more and more about brand and their sales and marketing. From a digital perspective, the Internet of Things has been spoken about on the main stage. It's one of the key topics here. The key to that from a manufacturing perspective is when you start making smart products, then you're opening yourself up to non-traditional manufacture, and the smart people will want to make your products. So you're no longer competing with the product people, you're now also competing with the smart people, and their business models are motivated in a very different way. And if you're not ready for that, they'll overwhelm you. 3D printing, as mentioned. One of the things to think about in terms of 3D printing and additive manufacture is it opens up self-service economics. If you think about the advent of the sort of McDonald's and these type of self-service restaurants, it wasn't the end of food retailing. It was just an entirely new form of economics, and how that might impact needs to be considered. And then you need to think about business in the digital environment. If you would consider social media and the cloud and the tools that are being used today as mere toys, and think of over the next 5 to 10 years that they're going to grow up to be proper tools, consider what they might do as proper tools if you can look at them today as just toys. From a people perspective, there's a global talent war imminent, and I think that Ireland's always been at the forefront of a talent war. And the key to this is the more you automate, the higher the caliber, the talent you need in the rest. Somebody this morning said the hard stuff is easy, it's the soft stuff that's hard. It's those softer skills that are harder to come by in the long term. The digital generation, there's a generation growing up now that is already fit for purpose for this digital revolution. So they know more about this than we do, and they won't fit into the boxes like we did and the people that came before us. So for the first time in history, organizations will have to mold themselves to the talent rather than expect the talent to mold themselves to those. And that's one of the biggest structural challenges organizations will face. From a leadership perspective, the big issue is moving away to true leadership is in, authority is out. People have less and less authority. You talk in large organizations, matrix organizations. People have responsibility for teams, have P&Ls, but everybody on that team has a dotted line to them and a solid line back to corporate. How do you pull together teams where you have no authority over the people in the team? That's not something that has been taught in business schools. So, to wrap up, a distortion is just a shake-up. Disruption is just a shake-up. They create more winners than they do losers. If you think about the early internet, and then you think about the mature internet, the stuff that could only occurred on the internet, the real value is in what happens in the second phase, and that's there for manufacturing companies to tap into, just as it is to disruptors to come into that space. We live in a small, agile economy that's already a global player in digital. We have a distinct advantage in this country. Manufacturing in Ireland has a great future, as far as I can see. So, just to conclude, the 4 key points that I'd like you to take away from this is innovation strategy. Innovation is straightforward unless you're being disrupted, but everybody is being disrupted. Capability, you need to get the most of what you already have. You need to sweat the assets you have. There's a lot of talk this morning here on lean. It's never been more important. It's never been, it has to be addressed in all sorts of areas that have never seen lean before. In terms of digital strategy, you have to understand that it's way more than automating the tasks that you have. It comes with an entire cultural change that you either embrace or it will destroy you. And finally, from a people perspective, people will reward being engaged more than driven. And I think at least 3 of the topics on the main stage had employee engagement as part of it. These people have to be brought in and collaborated with, and they have to feel that they're part of something, they have to believe in something. Biggest thing that needs to be dealt with, and I think the Irish mindset is very good at this. The biggest thing is the people side of it and the communication side of it, and that too I think Ireland has a particular advantage in. That's